Welcome back. Another episode of Tesseract's LNO Fireside Chat. I'm one of your co-hosts, Austin Barkdoll at McGuire, Joint Base McGuire, Dix Lakehurst, here with Nathan Den, my other co-host. Today we're here with Chief Master Tim Jordan. He was previously to his position as an SEL out at Luke. He was one of the Tesseract core members. He was actually, I believe, you were the lead, like the SEL for the Tesseract core team when they initially stood up, right?
I became the SEL. Yeah.
Okay,
I
cool,
was originally hired onto the team as a senior master sergeant, focusing on theory of constraints solely, and then I got promoted to chief, and then flew up to the SEL position for the team.
awesome. And yeah, we met a couple times before through TOC facilitator training that I went down to Andrews, the TOC summit. So yeah, but so our topic today is talking about what theory of constraints is, and really is nobody better to kind of talk that out because Chief Jordan has a ton of experience with it through slingshots and different events that he's done. Um, so he's going to be able to give us kind of a look into like what our rough agenda today is to kind of talk about what theory of constraints is, how it's applied. Um, maybe we could touch on how the Air Force started to adopt it through A4, and then we get into some of the events that you worked on, and then where you're currently at Luke. How since you've come out of the Tesseract Corps and gone back to your AFSC, how have you been able to apply it out there too? So before I hand it off to you, Chief, I'll give it over to Nate if you want to do any kind of little rough intro.
No, I think you got it all there, Austin. Actually, I'm actually pretty excited. I read over the material last night, so I got a quick overbrief of what we're going to go over today. So I, like hopefully many of our listeners, not hearing this for the first time, but going to deep dive more into what theories of constraints is and how much the Air Force is using it. So I'm actually more excited to just hear from you, Chief, and your experiences. And like Austin said, what the Air Force is doing with this. As I was reading the stuff last night, going over theory of constraints, it just reminded me of a whole mess of business classes that I'd taken with other different theories and frameworks. But this is something that I never touched on or even saw before. So I'm pretty excited, at least for what was presented in the readout that Hannah gave us about what it is and how we're using it. So without further ado, Chief, go ahead. I'm going to throw this over to you and let you just take this one away. And we'll jump in with questions.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate it. Yeah, so theory of constraints has been around since the 80s. It originally came out of Israel. Dr. Eli Goldratt created this. He's a physicist, and he wanted to focus on what he could do to use a scientific theory to get after process improvement for businesses. And he created the theory of constraints. He wrote the book The Goal, which is a very popular book, millions of copies sold worldwide. And what it essentially says is, you need to focus on what is eating your lunch the most, that constraint of your organization, because you can only produce as much as that constraint can produce, right? So it's really basic. It's common sense to a lot of people, but the process of going through these steps is uncommon, and sometimes it conflicts with the way that military service, or not just that, but aircraft maintenance specifically, traditionally focuses on. So what we have tried to do in the Air Force is we try to take the theory of constraints, tool sets, and the lessons that it's taught, and apply those to multiple facets, not just aircraft maintenance. We've done it to logistics, supply chain. We've done it to IDRCs for deployment processing to try to speed up that. We've done it to vehicle maintenance organizations as well, to increase the throughput of getting vehicles back out to the base populace that needs those GOVs. So it's been used to a wide array. Most recently, I believe the Tesseract team was working with the Air Force Special Office of Investigation, the OSI office, and what they did was they looked at case files and found a quicker and faster process to take criminal cases and index them. So people that got removed from the military aren't allowed to purchase weapons if they got a felony conviction or something like that. So there's tons of usages, tons of opportunities for it to be implemented, and I'm really glad that it's catching fire, and people are understanding that they can make massive improvements even if they're already successful in their organization. So that's TOC in a nutshell, and how the Air Force is why the Air Force has gotten on board with it.
Yeah, well, I'll definitely throw in the theory of constraints as we just went down a few months ago to the summit, and I'm the first sergeant in a communications squadron, and they brought the whipboard in, they brought the TOC foundational information, the knowledge that they gained through that course. We were 2022's best, AMC's best small comm squadron, and we have implemented TOC to the point where our metrics are even better than they were last year. So I don't see how I think that they've done a phenomenal job of working, being able to prioritize tickets and I mean, we're not chasing metrics, you know what I mean? That's not the point. We're not trying to chase those metrics or anything, but that's really what it made work easier, and it streamlined it for everybody. So we're actually working less, but we're doing more. So well, I can get into that too, but so yeah, the A6 community can definitely benefit from this as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's start off with maybe, I guess, more of a deep dive to what it was like to start Tesseract, and how did you get involved with TOC? Like, how did the Air Force and theory of constraints kind of amalgamate?
Yeah, so I'll start at the beginning. There was a noticed improvement needed in our aircraft depot facilities to get our aircraft out of the depot where they get big overhaul maintenance. Aircraft are down for hundreds of days, totally tore down to the bare bones, and then reassembled and sent back out to the field so they can continue to do their mission. But those processes were taking too long. So the Air Force reached out to a consultant group, Goldratt Consulting, and said, "Hey, can you come in here and make some improvements?" They were able to do that. They made massive improvements within the C5 aircraft depot over at Robbins, Georgia, and they were like, "Hey, this is working great." They shaved off hundreds and hundreds of days worth of downtime for this process, and with that process, they went ahead and parlayed that and went in and tried to cement those processes in all depots, and that turned into the art of the possible, which is where all the depots are continuously using art of the possible, which is based in theory of constraints amongst a bunch of other process improvement focus areas. So what they did was they said, "Hey, this works great, but maybe it only works in the depots." Fast forward years and years down the line, they said, "Can this also work for flight line organizations?" And that was the experiment. So they went back to that Goldratt consultant team and they said, "Okay, can we test you at active duty bases?" And they tested them at 3 locations. They tested them at Fairchild on KC-135s. They tested them at Ellsworth on B-1s. They tested them at Shaw Air Force Base on F-16s. All 3 of these different organizations all had marked improvements. It definitely worked on the flight line. But what happened was I was sitting over at Kadena Air Base on F-15s in Okinawa, Japan. And my organization was very successful. We've always been successful. We've always met our mission. We were doing good things as we always did. But we sat at the AMXS at the Aircraft Maintenance Squadron, and the director of operations of the DO and myself were talking, and we're like, "Hey, can we be better?" Of course you can. So the answer is always yes. So what we did was we reached out to Shaw Air Force Base and we said, "Hey, let me copy your homework. Let me see what you're working on over there. What slides do you guys have?" So when they went ahead and shared, it's open kimono, man. We want to see exactly what's going on so we can all be a better Air Force for it. And they shared their information. We internally we had their notes, we had their slides. But we didn't understand exactly how to take the lessons on that paper and implement them in actual execution on the flight line. So there was a lot of internal discussions. We went online and we bought every single book we could buy on theory of constraints and read up on it. A bunch of books by Dr. Goldratt. There's a thick book like this thick on the theory of constraints handbook that's out there. And we use that like a TO. And whenever we needed a question answered, we went to the textbook and we were looking in there for how do we answer these questions. That plus a bunch of early morning Zoom calls and Skype calls to our friends over in Shaw. We finally got some solutions, and then it took our getting our heads around what we wanted to do with it. And we all knew that it started with education. We have to educate our force on what this is that we're trying to do, why it's a good thing, why we should take the risk to make a marked improvement. And it's very difficult when people are already successful to take a leap where they have a chance to fail. Right. So we're already meeting our mission. What do we need to do better? But can we be doing more to meet our mission? Can we give more time back to our airmen? Can we be more effective? And that was the question. So we took that plan of implementation of theory constraints to the maintenance group commander, and at the time it was Colonel Bill Ray, and he was already doing. We had like a book club that we were doing with the officers and the senior NCOs. It was academics, and we were talking about the goal. So instead of discussing the book, the goal, we wanted to implement theory of constraints as opposed to just having a book club discussion. He was all for that, and he was willing to take that risk on to see if we could be a higher performing organization. So what we did was we implemented theory constraints locally based upon what Shaw was already doing, and then we gave it a Kadena spin or an F-15 spin, if you will. And we said, how can we go ahead and implement it, which is unique for this organization based upon our constraints, because our constraints may not have been Shaw's constraints. We were very successful in doing that. We had instant feedback as soon as the results started coming in, which was every aircraft was available. You know, we were able to meet our mission easily. Ops was happy with what we were producing, and there was a point where we had trouble keeping up with the demand that Ops had. But when we implemented fully with theory of constraints, Ops ran out of pilots, and we had aircraft available, just waiting on more pilots to show up. So that was a good problem to have, and it really turned some good things around. Because it was so successful, a lot of the people that were against it in the very beginning finally bought into the change, and we had a lot of success with that afterwards. With that being said, I applied to Tesseract around the same time for the original core cadre. The initial team, when it was getting stood up, was hired. I think a lot of the work that we were doing with theory of constraints helped with that process. So when I got to the team, Major Kelsey Smith was saying, "Hey, go ahead and this will be your focus area. I need you to work on theory of constraints implementation and what that means for the entire Air Force." And that was my job on Tesseract the entire time, trying to figure out a strategic look for theory of constraints implementation across the entire Air Force, as opposed to just making my F-15s fly better, was a completely different skill set, problem set. But the experience that I gained from that process was invaluable on the Tesseract team. So what we did was we still engaged with the field. I still talked to my DO, which is Major Alex Pagano, and he went to a different base, and he went to different organizations. And Colonel Ray, I kept in touch with him. He went to a different organization. Actually, he came to Luke next after Kadena. And what we did was we tried to refine and increase the success of implementation of theory constraints regardless of the location, because other organizations at the time, specifically Mountain Home Air Force Base, was very interested in learning about theory of constraints. The slingshot idea came to fruition. So Major Pagano, who I previously mentioned, was asked to come out from Kadena to go to Mountain Home Air Force Base to educate theory of constraints. So he liaised with Tesseract, and two members from Tesseract, Captain Sophie Rizzo and now Chief Paul Hammer, went out to Mountain Home Air Force Base with Major Pagano, and they all did a theory of constraints slingshot session, which was the very first one. It was very successful. Mountain Home was able to go from not knowing anything about theory of constraints to being fully educated within 3 days to having a plan to execute within 5 days. And they had an entire leadership team bought in, and they were ready to execute the following week. And what's really good about these slingshots is it's quick learning, right? It's I would say it's common sense once you understand the terminology that kind of goes along with theory of constraints. A lot of it makes sense. You just have to stay consistent. There's a lot of times where there's an alligator closer to your boat, or there's a fire, or something doesn't go right on a shift, and then you stop doing what you should be doing. You go back to old habits to take care of those things, and then you get stuck in your old ways again, which goes against what theory of constraints says. Theory of constraints says, hey, bad stuff's going to happen. Murphy's law is going to take over, right? But at the same time, you have to stay true to the rules you've established for your organization, because the consistency is what's going to matter long term, as opposed to the ebb and flow of those daily events. So if you're looking at throughput and you're looking at what you can produce at the very end of your month, year, flying hour program, you're going to be more successful sticking with these rules that you've established for yourself. So that was the implementation of the beginning of Slingshot. Then Gold Consultant was still contracted by the Air Force, by the A4 office, to go out to different Air Force bases and implement different theory of constraints projects. But what we wanted to do was, they had a limited capacity. So we wanted Tesseract to grow and be able to also offer those educational opportunities via Slingshot to any other organization across the Air Force that was interested in starting this TOC journey. We essentially want to provide all the information, provide all the tools, all the training, but we want those organizations to buy into their solution, and we want them to come up with their own ideas of what works for their organization, because I can't come in from a outside agency and tell you how to run your world, because I don't know your constraints, your people, the way you do. But I can teach you the tools and stuff, and then you and your team can develop your solution that works for your base, for your mission set. So using that framework, we went ahead and really try to make good change across the Air Force, and then share that information based upon case studies after every event was accomplished, which is now hosted on the Evolve platform, that Tesseract will continue to post for every single event that's accomplished, because we don't want to hold this information to ourselves or just to that organization. We don't want one organization just to be great and everybody else to suffer. We want everybody to learn from the goodness that's going around the Air Force.
One of the things that I love about theory of constraints is the mentality, I guess, the culture that it breeds when you start to implement TOC, of asking yourself continuously, can we do things better? Can we keep improving? Can we do so? To me, I define that as more like offensive innovation versus defensive innovation. Like, you're not waiting for problems to come up, but you're constantly striving to continue to make it more efficient, streamline it more, because everything can be improved, right? I mean, there's probably some, you know, there's probably some end to that, but like we certainly haven't gotten to it, right? So that's, like I said, that's one of the things I love about TOC. I believe AFIT is now running 101, 201 courses for that, but I really want to get into that, kind of share that wealth with the people out there too.
Yeah, with those AFIT courses that are out there, they're a huge partner and part of the solution, right? So AFIT is, the Air Force Institute of Technology. They have outstanding instructors, an outstanding history of producing world-class training and education to our Air Force members, military members, offering degree courses, master level courses. But what they did was, they said that there was we needed a standardized training plan for theory of constraints, but we also don't want to be a constraint ourselves at Tesseract, or be a constraint with the contractors at Goldrat. So what can we do to expand the services of theory of constraints to help any organization that wants to get there? And we thought that education was a key piece, right? So the theory of constraints plan, or the I guess the framework, or the way that Tesseract wants to get after theory of constraints implementation across the Air Force, is threefold. They want to generate results, they want to educate the force, and they want to communicate those results, right? So those are the pieces. So the educational piece is massive, right? So AFIT is the greatest place to put that. Their instructors have a consistent course, and what they do is, they don't if you ask like myself or somebody to come out, I'm going to give you a very aircraft maintenance focused education piece, I will try to tailor it to your organization. AFIT has made it a very generic course that it is AFSC agnostic. Anybody that wants that education can come learn about it. I think a lot of their examples are hamburger stands. So if you can understand the process of that, I think you can relate it to your organization of whatever you're producing. So they do offer a 201 and a 101 course. They're progressive, so you get the basics in the 101, and then you get some application in the 201 course. There's in-work development for an additional senior leader level one. So why is it important to, in 06 somewhere, a group commander, if you will, or a squadron or squadron commander or even a wing commander? Why is TOC important to them? Why should they buy in? And why do they need to be a champion for this process change? And really that's the key piece. That's make or break. I've been to plenty of organizations where you've got senior leader engagement and you're going to have a great successful TOC project because they're going to hold their team accountable for the results that they want to get after. But when you have a senior leader that's like, hey, take it or leave it, or TOC is your thing, I'm not really worried about it, I'm not forcing it to do it. People are like, cool, if you're not going to force me to do something, I'm comfortable doing my current job in my current way because that's how I've been trained and that's how I'm going to do it. And I'm going to get the same results that we've gotten for years. But if you want an increased marked level of success, let's try something different. And you need those risk taker senior leaders that are willing to say, hey, to get to great or to get to, excellent, I'm willing to try something different and get uncomfortable. But those senior leaders that are uncomfortable or that are comfortable with being uncomfortable, you're going to see more success long term with those senior leaders. So that's massive in the different successes that I've seen across the Air Force.
Can you give an example? You don't have to share names or anything like that. This is a safe space, but have you ever come across a senior leader during an event that you had to find a way to make them actually, they kind of maybe had a more indifferent kind of neutral approach and weren't so much of the champion that you wanted them to be? Did you, do you have any lessons learned, or how did you get that person to start to believe in it?
I've got a few examples that pop in my brain. Definitely no names or bases, but I can use ranks. So there was a organization where the senior leader, which was the group commander, maintenance group commander, and ops group commander, did not see eye to eye. It was an us versus them mentality at the organization. When we arrived, it was very much a ops is asking for the world and they don't care what maintenance has to go through to get it done. Maintenance is saying if we commit everything that we need to do, we'll always be broke. We'll be in the maintenance death spiral and we'll never be able to dig out of these holes that they're going to put us in. They just don't understand. And it was very an us versus them. And because the senior leader was vocal about that stuff, the lower leaders co-signed that senior leader's point of view, and it was very hostile environment between the maintenance and ops community, which is unfortunate because that we don't like to fight ourselves. We should be all on the same team, right? So what got that team on the page was results. As soon as the results started coming in, everybody changed their tune, but they had to go through it. Now they supported the theory of constraints implementation. Obviously, we were there in person. Having Major General Hurry as a champion and advocate at the headquarters Air Force level is a very powerful piece when trying to get that information down to 06 levels. But we were there regardless, and as soon as the results came in, everybody started changing their tune, and now it's like they're on the same page. But what I noticed was the people that were the most vocal and against it in the very beginning, and they were influential, were some chief master sergeants. So some chiefs were very stuck in their ways, I would say. Maybe the frozen middle, maybe the frozen top, if you will. But they were saying, hey, we're already successful, we're already doing good enough, we're already meeting the standards that we've set for ourselves, right? But they didn't understand that just because you're doing good doesn't mean you can do also great. And when we say improvement, theory of constraints doesn't say like I'm going to improve you by 3.5%. Theory of constraints wants like a 75% increase, or 150% increase. They want massive changes with massive results. That's what we're really looking for. If there's a 1 or 2% increase, we're not going to waste our time with a theory of constraints event, because you're getting all the last little bit of juice out of that squeeze. We want a marked improvement where we can have a significant impact and change, and it's worth the time of the entire organization going through the change process. You want a massive increase in results. This specific chief master I was thinking about was over the phase process. They were in the maintenance squadron, and they identified that, hey, the phases are taking too long, or the ISO chronicle inspections are taking too long. We need to accomplish those quicker, because those aircraft that are sitting there, they don't come out ready to fly. They come out and then they go to fuel barn for the next 3 weeks, and they get fuels work done, and then they go out and they have to get rebuilt, and then maybe a month and a half after they're done with their phase or their isochronicle inspection, now the aircraft's ready to fly. They weren't taking that time, because they were saying, oh, that's not in addition to phase, and they were removing that time from their metrics that they were grading themselves upon. But the only thing that mattered is that aircraft was not available to fly. And that was the bottom line. If that aircraft's unavailable to fly, you can't use it for the mission. Ops group can't use it to train pilots. It is a worthless aircraft in the eyes of actuality, right? So whenever we came back and we gave them that hard truth, the only thing that got them to change their tune or buy into what we were saying is we presented them with data. And you can't argue math and you can't argue facts. So we went into their records, we got into the data, we produced a list of how long aircraft were downtime from last time it flew, the entire maintenance window, regardless if it was phase or fuels or wherever it was at, and then the next time it flew. And we said, we need to take this total time and reduce it. Then they started buying into it, because now, and I think they felt like we were, poking them in the chest and saying, you guys need to make improvements. And it's not the case. No, there was no blame associated to it. We just need to identify where improvements can be made and then focus on those improvement areas. So I think that was overall maybe some of those senior leaders that took a little bit to buy in. There's other ones that I've seen with less success overall, is when we went and we briefed, we did a slingshot, for instance. We went through the whole training. There was minimal support to the training. So they sent some maybe lower ranking airmen that weren't able to make decisions. So whenever we were coming up with solutions, the decision makers weren't the right people in the room. And whenever we went to go brief the actual solution to the group leadership said, hey, that's great. We're going to go ahead and implement it. That sounds awesome. You guys did great work. High fives. They were really supportive, which was great. We left, and then they did nothing with it. There was no follow-up. There was nobody was held accountable to do what they said they were going to do. And it died on the vine. And that because a senior leader allowed it to die on the vine. Didn't hold their team accountable, and that team got away with just coming up with a bunch of good ideas and then going back to doing everything that they normally did. That organization did not see a marked increase, and unfortunately, that was a failure when we think of the implementation of theory constraints. But it's also for the team going through that, it's a lot of lessons learned. We took a lot of what we learned from that negative experience, and then we changed what we did when we implemented in the future to make sure that there was additional buy-in by senior leaders. They understood the impact of not making follow-up meetings with these teams and continuing down that process. The most difficult piece of theory of constraints, unfortunately, is the sustainment. It's easy to get the results. It's very hard to sustain those results and to cement that into the culture of that organization. Especially when your champion is a 2-year PCS cycle commander who's only there for a couple of years. And as soon as they leave, if a new commander comes in and does not have the same experience, education of theory of constraints, or had been through that journey with that organization of theory of constraints, they can just assume that, hey, this is how it's always been here, and I can just show up and do what I've always done, and the organization will slip back into those old ways because nobody's driving that new culture of continuous improvement. So those are some good and hard lessons learned that we've experienced, but some people get it, and some people just need some more time.
But yeah, that's great. Thanks for sharing that, Chief. That's I guess my personal thought on that is I think that we should have some type of marker for senior leadership or just leadership in general to be able to identify whether things have been, changes have been sustained. Do you feel the same way? Like, do you feel like that leadership should be able to jump in and sustain changes made, or I guess I don't know, like, does that make sense? Like, I'm just trying to get your views on that, because I agree with you 100%. Like, sustainment is really tough because of all of the moves and changes that are made in personnel and personalities, and um, yeah, we're no stranger to that.
Yeah, I would say because the statement's so hard, it's so important to be consistent. And I think that senior leaders should have that part of their turnover. Um, Not every change of command goes as consistent as we'd like to see. There's leaders that are removed. There's assumptions of command because there's a gap in leadership teams where a deputy will have to step in to hold down the group, if you will, before the new group commander arrives. There's different education levels. So what we did at Tesseract was we understood that this is brand new education that we're trying to get out to the Air Force, and not every group commander has the opportunity to go to AFIT for a week and focus on TOC 201. So what we did was we reached out to the Eaker Center over at Montgomery, Alabama, and we said, hey, can we jump into the group commander leadership course that brand new group commanders go through as part of their process in becoming a new group commander? And the answer was yes. Working with their team, we have some time, so we are able to give a briefing now to new oncoming group commanders, and we tell them about theory of constraints. We talk to them about the goodness that can come out of that and the opportunities for education, so they can get like at least a crash course of what it is and some of the terminology. So if they show up to an organization that already is doing theory of constraints, they're not unfamiliar with the terminology or with why that organization has gone through that journey. Um, as far as like a marked um, improvement type tracking, I believe uh, as we institutionalize across the Air Force theory of constraints, hopefully it becomes the new norm and we stop talking about it because it's just the way we do business. That's my hope and dream, to eventually train and educate the force so Tesseract can focus on another innovative process and continue that push forward. Um, we worked with the Amos schoolhouse for aircraft maintenance, and we implemented theory of constraints tools into the latest version of our TTPs. Actually, I got one right here on my desk. So in here, we got chapter 2, which is focusing on improvements to the organization as far as organizational management and aircraft maintenance. And in here, we have like theory of constraints items straight from our training that we do with theory of constraints implementation. And now it's at the fingertips of every maintainer that wants to educate themselves on ways that we've been successful implementation of theory of constraints and how we can manage aircraft maintenance utilizing a theory of constraints mindset. So trying to institutionalize in the culture of aircraft maintenance specifically, but hopefully across the Air Force in general, regardless of specialty code, it can be the way we do business. And then we beat that 2-year leadership cycle of turnover. And hopefully that's a way to combat that. But I think we're not done yet. There's always more that we can do and more that we can put our heads together and think about ways to implement. There's I know continuing efforts by Tesseract to get into different schoolhouses. So if you go away to get any type of training, you're going to get a little TOC injected into that. So if you're going to maintenance officer school and you're learning about how the mock works or how flight operations operate, you're going to get a little theory of constraints built into that. Hopefully, in the future, when you go to pro super school and learn how to manage the flight line from an enlisted perspective or an expediter course, you also get a little bit of theory of constraints, because if you manage utilizing a theory of constraints mindset, you're going to have efficiencies built in that aren't currently taught in another schoolhouse. So those are the types of long-term goals that we're trying to get after, I think. But I don't want to say that that senior leaders need to be graded upon how they sustain things, because missions always change, right? So what works for one commander could be a whole different set of challenges for a new commander based upon mission requirements, based upon if they're divesting legacy aircraft and taking on a fifth gen aircraft, based upon a new mission requirement because that aircraft now was modified and now it has the ability to do a certain other mission set. And now the focus changes, right? So I believe we need to grade ourselves off of, are we meeting our mission requirements? So for aircraft maintenance, can I keep my pilots happy in the operations community? If the answer is yes, I can keep them trained and proficient and the best fighter pilots in the world, I'm good. I'm meeting my mission. Everything else is bonus. If I can outproduce what my ops are asking for, I can utilize that other time to lean forward, be proactive, and make those uh, long-term fleet health decisions that's going to sustain our success long term. Um, what I've seen, which is a great opportunity, is because we've done so many theory constraints projects across the Air Force, we've been able to see a whole lot of different problem sets that different organizations are going through. One of the organizations that bought into theory constraints pretty early on was Mildenhall. Mildenhall was very successful. They had a KC 135 kind of like en route type scenario set up over there. They had no problem meeting their mission. They were always meeting their mission every single day. They were very successful, but they still wanted theory constraints. And the ask was why? What marked improvement can we show? What can we say? We had this much increase of mission efficiency, or what? And the answer was no. We want to be really, really efficient with our time, because we want to take that extra time that we save and we want to give it back to our airmen and take care of them. We want to provide airmen for life opportunities where we allow our maintainers to get educated on certain things, get time with their families, get time writing EPRs and decorations, as opposed to doing that at the end of their duty day and they're still working. We wanted to make sure that they could do that during their duty day. And Mildenhall really focused on taking care of their airmen, which really shows that TOC can be utilized to meet whatever requirement that your organization values, right? And Mildenhall valued airmen's time, and that's what they focused on, and that's what they were able to produce because they were more efficient with work. They had more time to get back to their airmen. So that was just a great example of a very focused reason, like a end game to get to, and they were very successful in that.
I'm loving hearing all of this. Just a few things that have kind of stuck out, Chief, and maybe you can reiterate those or talk your experiences through them. A lot of what you're saying for this model, this theory, really just life in general, the small sustained improvements over time, consistency, not necessarily neglecting the close alligator, but understanding that the alligator is going to get to the boat, and you can't stop the small, good, sustained, consistent steps to just attack one item when you know that, by doing those consistent things, you're not only going to get rid of that close alligator, you're going to get rid of the one that's 12 feet away and still underneath the water. Can you kind of just talk a little bit on that and what it's been like for you and some organizations that you've led through on that, as far as, because I mean, Austin and I know, and obviously like our Air Force is very, very good at reacting to the very close item and neglecting some of the things that we know are still going to come or that we don't necessarily see. And what has it been like to try to implement that into some of your culture shifts?
It all starts with a focused senior leader driving the change. And culturally, this isn't what we want to do, right? We want to be problem solvers. I think there's a whole lot of alpha, personalities that are out there where everybody wants to be the person, but understanding it's a team effort, right? So as long as your team is working in the right direction, you will ultimately be part of the machine that is successful. Culturally in aircraft maintenance, and I was part of it growing up, and I had to change how I thought, and going through this process with theory of constraints and becoming educated myself, going through all the training that I've gone with Goldratt Consultant, all the work we've done with Tesseract, and all the education that I've done on top of all that. It's changed my perspective. I thought, and I still believe, that I was a very successful crew chief, expediter, pro super, lead pro super, superintendent, all those things. I was very successful. I met my mission, deployments, everything. It was very good. But I could have been more successful or more efficient if I would have learned these facts way, way earlier. And I try to take those lessons learned. And I think there's some credibility to whenever I go out to a maintenance organization and have those conversations, because I was those people and I can communicate it from their perspective and speak to the language that um, they identify with, because they value certain things. There's a pride that's part of it, and I want to make sure that they understand that just be going through theory constraints and following a set of standards doesn't mean that the decision making goes away from you or anything like that. It just means that you're dependent on in a different role for a different reason at a different time. And um and a lot of times with organizations, especially with the Air Force that we currently have, uh and maybe not right now, but previously, a lot of people promoted quickly and they got into different ranks without really having the time of being that senior airman, being that staff sergeant, being that seven level, and now they're in a leadership position and they were just getting comfortable with the previous job that they had. So what they do is they kind of latch on to their old job as opposed to trying to learn their current or move up to learning their boss's job, because of the rapid promotions. So we have a lot of in the maintenance world, expediters that are still trying to make decisions on the aircraft by being a seven level and making those calls. So they don't need to do that. They need to manage the maintenance. They need to manage their. They need to expedite. And a lot of the pro supers who are just left from an expediter truck recently, they want to fall back and they want to manage day-to-day aircraft maintenance, which is their expediter's job. So you've got a lot of pro supers micromanaging my expediters. You got a lot of expediters micromanaging the seven levels, and now the seven levels are not getting the education that they need. And by the way, they just promoted and now they're the new expediter. So you've got a lot of culture based upon how the system was set up for decisions that were being made. Um, in that world now, you implement theory of constraints and say, hey, you should limit the amount of total aircraft or projects or processes that you're working on. Lower your WIP to a manageable number to manage. So let's call that 4. Let's call that 5, something like that. If I'm only managing 5 aircraft, and I used to be able to manage 8 to 10 aircraft for hard broke aircraft that I'm trying to fix, I feel like I got a lot more time available. So what we want to do is we want to fill that time and keep ourselves busy. We end up multitasking. When we multitask, our attention is split in too many different directions. What happens is the priority thing that we needed to fix gets ignored because we're somewhere where we shouldn't be focusing, because we're trying to juggle too many things. By the time we circle back to that priority, it's been waiting there for 30 minutes for our attention, for a decision to be made, for a part, for a person, for a resource, and we've ignored it for 30 minutes. What happens is those 30 minutes per aircraft over time accumulate. And at the end of the week, now you're working weekend duties or 12-hour shifts because you made poor decisions on Monday that's now affecting your Friday. So when we understand that there's a cause and effect and the decisions that we make affect things, there's a lot of alligators that are closer to boat or fires that were started by us or put in the water by us because we made poor decisions 4 days ago, right? So you need to understand that if you are consistent with decision making and you have a reasonable, manageable thing, and you plan for work with buffer as opposed to reactions based upon the closest alligator or whatever, you're going to be more successful long term, right? You can make day to day changes like, hey, I could have saved 20 minutes here or 30 minutes here. But over the course of the week or the month, you've lost hours, right? But yeah, you had that one time. Now, there's a part of the training that we do with theory of constraints, with the TOC courses that AFIT teaches, with the slingshot that Tesseract teaches, with what Gold Rat teaches, is there's a multitasking exercise. And I'm sure a lot of our listeners may have gone through it, or if anybody's familiar with TOC, it's like a 1, 2, 3, ABC and a bunch of shapes. And you write these things out. And it shows that with multitasking, you're going to be less successful than if you focused and finished on whatever your task is at hand. You're going to make less mistakes. You're going to make uh, less errors. You're going to have to do less rework by going back and fixing your mistakes because you were rushing through, or your brain was somewhere else. It's a very simple lesson, and you knock it out in a couple minutes. But the impact, I think, on somebody's psyche that needs to do something to actually like make the mistake and then see that the error of their ways, that really, I think, helps reflect on what we do on the flight line, because I think a lot of things with the Air Force is we're really good at making excuses. we can make 100 excuses of why something didn't work, and it was the system was built against me, or I didn't have the part delivered on time, or this component broke because it's a bad component. It wasn't my management decisions. Well, all of those things are based on management. So if we can take some onus on ourselves and say, I can do a better job, or I have the opportunity to make better decisions based upon a standardized set of processes that I can be trained and taught. So, uh, so our organization can overall be successful. I think we should do those things. Um, when I go to a lot of organizations and train these things, some people who are very successful and they know their stuff say, "Hey, I'm already doing all this stuff. It's just a fancy name, but stuff I'm already doing." That's right. You may be doing it. You may be very successful, but everybody isn't you. You are probably the best person in your entire section. What happens when you take leave, or when you go TDY, or when you have to do something or go to a class or something like that? Do you want to stay in that job forever? Do you want to eventually promote or go to a different position? The answer is probably yes. So, how do we make more of you? We're going to standardize it. We're going to put it in a book. We're going to call it theory constraints, and we're going to implement it. So everybody for every shift all does the same thing. It's not just the one good person at their job, or the one person who just gets it instinctively or naturally. We want everybody on every shift to be trained to do these things properly, so we have consistency. When we have consistency, it's very easy to manage and predict when you're going to need resources. When we talk in theory of constraints about full kitting, it's not just getting everything you need right before you walk out to the job. It's predicting what you're going to need a week from now for a scheduled maintenance task that isn't due yet, to make sure that I have all those resources locally here and set aside for when I start that task a week out, because I need lead time if I want to order parts that are not at my location. Those types of mental gymnastics need to happen at a pro super, lead pro super level for aircraft maintenance, where you're making those decisions a week out when you're thinking long term, but you're not focusing on the day-to-day maintenance. You have to trust your expediters to be able to do that. You have to trust your 7 levels to make good decisions on the aircraft. So everybody is dependent on each other, but when we start trying to do each other's jobs, who's going to do your job? So um, I think long term, when we look at, closest alligators to the boat, a lot of it's self-induced. Um, and if we had a standardized process such as theory of constraints that any maintenance organization, any shift, any skilled person can do, you're going to have a lot more consistency and a lot more efficiency across the Air Force.
I think a lot of it does boil down to like that extreme ownership. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know how many
Absolutely.
of our listeners have read the book or the audiobook for Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink, but highly recommend that. It's just something that kind of points, it's like your North Star, you know what I mean? Like, everything is within your sphere of control or influence, and you don't have to be a exactly. I love it. I do. I mean, and it's like, it's not rocket science, you know what I mean? It is just so simple. Just taking on and being accountable for those things, and not accepting the status quo, and not accepting failure. So I think that's great. We got a couple minutes left, so before we wrap up, could you tell us about anything, as moving out of the Tesseract and going back to your AFSC? I see you had your APG patch on, and being the SEL out there at Luke, back in maintenance. Like, have you led any events, or have you seen the goodness of TOC out there? And then lastly, I mean, Nate, if you have any questions, please, for the last couple minutes. But yeah, what you've done at Luke, and then do you have any other information where airmen can go out and start learning about their constraints, or how can they get involved?
Yeah, absolutely. So great question. Coming to Luke was definitely a blessing coming out of Tesseract. Luke Air Force Base is, I believe, the most bought in, well established theory of constraints operational base in the Air Force. I want to say that. And it was prior to me getting here. And it was all because of the previous group commander, Colonel Bill Ray, who's retired now, holding his lessons learned from when he was at Kadena as the group commander. And he realized that he didn't do enough there to sustain the results that he saw. And it was very dependent on the personalities of like myself or a couple other people that were there, whenever we all started PCS in a way, there started declining on the implementation and the actual usage of the theory constraints processes that we've established, right? New people, they came in, they were untrained. There wasn't a solid training pipeline where it was held accountable, and they kind of slipped away from what they were doing over there. Taking those lessons learned, he was like, not again. I've got 2 years in command. I'm going to focus on it at Luke as soon as I hit the ground. So it became a culture shock to a lot of the people that were already here at Luke, because it was a lot of change very quickly, and they didn't have a say in in that change. So um, with with that being said, he leveraged everything that all the tools that are out there for the any organization to leverage. He reached out to Tesseract, and we went out to Luke Air Force Base. I believe I came out here 3 times in the last year I was in Tesseract to help with theory constraints implementation. I believe AFIT was out here on the ground at least 2 of those events. Doing their education, they taught their 201 course, and they continue to this day. I think we have another one coming up soon, where AFIT is a reoccurring course where the base, the wing here pays for AFIT to come out, establish the course. They shove as many new officers and senior NCOs and decision makers in this course so they can get that education. Uh, in addition to that, the local CPI office, the CPI and Innovation Office at Luke Air Force Base, has their own theory of constraints course, which is like a mini slingshot that they also offer, and it's a mandatory training that requires everybody that's in a leadership role has to take when they get to Luke Air Force Base. So nobody's getting away from theory of constraints. Being at Tesseract doing theory of constraints and then coming to the most open TOC base that there is was definitely a blessing. My first role was I was the AMU SEL for one of the units over here, Top Dog AMU 61st. And we had a great team around us. The production staff was totally bought in on what theory of constraints can do for them. But being back in the field and being back in my favorite place, which is the flight line, it was definitely a blessing, because I was able to work with that production section and pour into them everything that I've been giving to the rest of the Air Force for the last 2 years on Tesseract. I was able to really give into the single production section, and we are able to revolutionize or change the way that we thought about stuff, the way that we display information, the way that decisions are made in that production office. When we were focusing on low whip, we discussed that there's only so many bays in your mind. It's like a shop, and there's only so many bays that you can have aircraft in work, and everything else is parked outside. So you have to move an aircraft out of your bay before you bring another aircraft in. This is all like on a brain. So we put it on a dry erase board, and then we walked into the production office, and all of their expediters and pro supers were sitting around talking about, okay, if this one finishes up early, when will this one be ready to come in? Is it full kitted? Do we have everything we need to get that job done? Okay, what manpower will we have? Okay, that's going to happen around shift change, and we're going to lose the manpower because it's going to go to mid shift. We need to pause that because we can't finish it. So don't start what we can't finish until the next shift. And now you have a great collaborative decision making team where they're all part of that solution. That's what I wanted to see. It was a beautiful moment. They did really good things. I had a great opportunity to volunteer, and I got picked up to become the group SEL. So now I'm here at the maintenance group, working with Colonel Adam DiGirolamo, who came from Misawa Air Base, and he is all on board with theory of constraints, and he wants to maintain what we've been doing here at Luke to keep that sustainment going. If Luke can crack the shell, or crack the nut, I guess, on what sustainment looks like and what right looks like for the Air Force, hopefully we can share that lessons learned back with the Tesseract team, so then we can push that out to the rest of the Air Force overall. Um, but yeah, it is embedded up and down at Luke Air Force Base, the way that all of our maintenance officers are discussing theory of constraints. WIP is our slides in the morning meeting. We don't discuss every single aircraft that we have. We only discuss the ones that are in active work or the ones that are in queue, and what we need to do with those aircraft in queue, if it's like ordering parts or what's the status on those, and what aircraft are going to come up that day. And we really only want to focus on what our flying commitment is for that day. And if we can meet our flying commitment, we're done with the conversation, because that's the mission. If we're able to be mission accomplished, There's no more conversation. We don't need to talk about the fifth jet that you're not going to work because it's waiting parts. There's no reason to talk about aircraft. We don't waste time talking about it. We only focus on what's important. And because the group commander is only asking questions about those aircraft that can be affected with change, the focus is on getting those aircraft greened up, as opposed to having an answer for the boss on every single aircraft all the way down to the bottom one, which has given a lot of time back to our organizations to get boots on the ground to make sure that we're doing what we say we're going to do, and it's really successful. It's given a lot of time back to our organizations um, overall. So yeah,
It really is amazing. It really is amazing how useful TOC is. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like it almost sells itself, especially in maintenance. You know what I mean? You might have to get a little bit creative outside of the A4 community, but it's definitely possible. You know, and everyone says it's a small Air Force, but Colonel DiGirolamo was my squadron commander at Charleston in the 437th AMXS when I was there in the Blue Knights.
I love it.
Small world. I'm sure
world.
he's probably still like running marathons and being super fit. I
Absolutely.
remember he was.
Yeah. So I really appreciate the opportunity to come talk to you guys and talk to the LNO community as a whole. I want to be a resource. I'm an LNO now that I'm off the Tesseract team, and I still want to contribute to the overall good of what they're doing out there, and echoing all the greatness that team is accomplishing. There's so many smart people that are still on that team. Master Sergeant Shannon Vigil. We got Tech Sergeant Pablo De La Cruz that are out there, and they've been on the team since the beginning, doing great things with theory constraints. And the team continues just to grow, and it's exciting to see where they're going, and it's exciting to see how big this LNO community is getting as well. Um, we really want to be here for each other. So if anybody's interested, reach out to me. I may be a chief, but I'm super low threat. Timothy Jordan, 4 on the global. Hit me up directly, and we can talk about theory constraints. We can talk about Tesseract and my time on the team there. Easy, find me on the Slack network. I'm on the LNO Slack channel. Hit me up directly with a message, and we'll talk, because whatever we can do to make our Air Force better, I'm all in. So let's do it.
I love it.
That's awesome.
Just want to say, Chief, thanks for your time. I know all of us, whenever we do one of these, we kind of move our schedules around. So thank you for doing that. I just wanted to add, I loved your last bits that you said as a supply troop that spent much of my years in an AMU, that the focus is just on flying jets. Oh man, the time that you would give back a supply troop, if I'm not tracking parts for aircraft that's not flying, I can do so many more things for you, as I'm sure that you're aware of. And so my heart just grew 3 sizes in the Christmas season of the Grinch hearing that. But as we close up, Austin and I do have moles out there, and I got a couple of softball questions that I was told that you're going to love. 2 of them for you. I need to know your favorite rap album and your favorite baseball team.
Obviously, the baseball team is the Yankees. I've got.
Oh, here we go.
Yankees stuff here. Yeah, diehard Yankees. I'm a baseball fan, so I'm here in Arizona now. I was at the World Series for the Diamondbacks and the Rangers when the Rangers won it, Game 5. That was awesome to see in person. Yeah, baseball all in, and we got spring training here. Great location. I'll be very happy for the next 2 years. Best rap album. So that's tough. So I love rap, and I have my favorite artists, and they have changed over the years. Huge, Biggie Smalls, Wu Tang, Lil Wayne. But the one rapper I can't not stop listening to is Juice World. Rest in peace. That I don't know. Any Juice World album, hard stop. He's a great artist, and his freestyles are amazing. But yeah, let's go with that.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks, Chief.
Yeah, we really do appreciate you coming on. We appreciate the Tesseract and the LNO community. Hopefully, I mean, that's been our goal, Chief, between Nate and I, as LNO reps. we're trying to share the goodness of all of this. It really is. I think it will be meaningful in the long run, and we're really trying to establish that culture and scale it out. And you know what I mean? We've seen it changing, and it's great. So we're gonna keep it going. You know, let's go.
Yeah, I'll be looking forward to seeing you guys out and about. I'm gonna try to hit up the LOA every year. If anybody can make it to that, and all the Tesseract summits, I try to make it back for those as well. So hopefully for LNO community out there, you guys see me at some of these events, please reach out, hit me up. Uh, let's grab a drink and chat because you know it's what we do. So